Okay, Mill Road, video number 2 on the topic of anger. Before I move on to the meat of the topic, I just simply must address two very important issues. One is the distinction between righteous indignation and anger, so that nobody confuses the two. And the second topic I want to address in this video is the dangers of resentment. Resentment equals resistance. So, starting with the distinction, or making the distinction, the very clear distinction between righteous indignation and anger. In all of these anger videos and addressing your angers, I'm not in any way talking about righteous indignation. There's a huge distinction between anger and righteous indignation. The righteous indignation is a byproduct of courage, and it is a first cousin, if you will, of knight errantry and chivalry, and it usually is mobilized in a person when they are faced with a great evil that simply must be stopped. It appeals to to a person's nobility, and thus it's a noble and selfless, no ego involved cause. So that is very, in short, that's kind of like what righteous indignation is. And we know that anger is simply just not that. Anger is unresolved issues. Anger has a very, very toxic effect on anything that it comes in contact with. And there really is no payoff. There's only loss when it comes to anger, okay? Totally different than, righteous indignation. Righteous indignation has a tad anger in it, but it's like the difference between heaven and hell, okay? So with that out of the way, I want to give one warning also. Don't think that just because you're mobilized behind a righteous cause that there couldn't be a seed of anger that could find its way into the righteous indignation, and use the righteous cause and the righteous indignation as a shield. And very fast that anger can metastasize, and things can become ugly and almost fascistic very, very quickly, all right? So there is issues, like it's very tricky sometimes when it comes to righteous indignation. It can be very tricky, and it can turn evil. So you've got to watch out that there isn't an unresolved seed of anger or something that somehow found its way in your righteous indignation and mobilized behind a righteous cause or a noble cause. And, it metastasizes like a tumor inside of it. And, it's hard to even see the distinction between, the anger and the righteous indignation if somehow your anger finds your way in it. So as a sort of caveat, a sort of warning, and just to make people aware, righteous indignation is a complete 180-degree distinction from anger, but it's very tricky because sometimes anger can find its way. I mean, the smallest seed of unresolved anger or egoic issues or chips on your shoulder, anything on your part, can find its way, the smallest seed can find its way behind a noble cause. And it can use righteous indignation as a shield. Okay, so that's a different topic altogether. I really just had to say that. And that there is a huge distinction between anger and righteous indignation. Moving on to the second issue that I want to address in this particular video before we move on to the meat of the topic of resolving your anger peaceably. This is the issue of resentment. Okay? Resentment is resistance. So when resentment is a byproduct of anger, and it's part of the entire personality disorder that comes along with anger. So it's self-perpetuating. It's unconscious. We are consciously aware of our resentment when it comes up, and we get into a pattern of justifying the resentment. Okay, so it self-perpetuates, and we're consciously aware of resentment the same way we're consciously aware of anger. Okay, but like anger is an unconscious, spontaneous event, so also is the byproduct of that anger, which is the resentment that we hold on to and we seek to justify. Okay? So here's what I want to say about resentment. These are like the key words. Resentment is resistance. Say it like a mantra. Resentment is resistance. Resentment is resistance. Think of like a railroad crossing. Ding, 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 ding. You don't want to cross a railroad crossing when you know a train is coming. It's going to impede your progress on this path. It will resist any progress. It's a part of a personality disorder that's self-perpetuating. Okay? Now, what I also want to say that your resentment is justifiable. You can find ways to justifiable, and there's obvious, but you're not going to get to, if you justify it, and you don't just simply lay it aside, keeping your eyes focused on the goal of peaceably resolving your anger, you'll never get to that energetic shift because of the resistance of resentment. You'll never get to that energetic shift in your conscious needed or necessary in order to get to a place where you could peaceably resolve your anger and whatever other issues might go along with it. So I'm not saying that it isn't justified. I'm not saying that resentment isn't like valid and stuff. It's just if your eye is on the goal of peaceably resolving your anger, when resentment begins to self-perpetuate and you become consciously aware of it, the best thing you can do, and the only thing you can really do if you're going to be able to go further to get to that place where you have your breakthrough, where you can see clear, you have your clarity, and you can actually peaceably resolve your anger, before you get to that, you're going to have to set the resentment aside. You can't justify your resentment. It's already justified. I'm just saying set it aside. You keep your eye on the goal of peaceably resolving your anger. Set the resentment aside. Remember, resentment is resistance. It's just like a railroad. Don't cross. Okay? With that said, until the next video, no road, over and out for now.